on doing the right thing, taking the right shots, being in the right place, focusing less on the outcome of things. Missed shots happen. It's going to happen in everyone's career.
Man.
Yeah, Kelsey obviously had to play out of position tonight. She had a season high 8 assists. Just how did you see her embrace having to do that, embrace having to do like what the team needed tonight?
Yeah, I mean that's who she is. She just wants to play, and
to punctuate like that.
I mean, it's fun. You know, the crowd was behind us today. It's fun to walk out of the gym on a high note and on a make. And
no Caitlin Clark, no point guards. On paper, this was a disaster waiting to happen for Indiana. But what if I told you that what came next wasn't just a win? It was a statement that could change their playoff destiny. Lexie Hull, who couldn't buy a three-pointer for weeks, suddenly caught fire in front of a roaring crowd. And the Chicago Sky never recovered. We're going to break down how the Fever turned a night of adversity into proof they can win big without their superstar. You think you know this team, you don't. Before we move on, I will like you to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Everyone figured Indiana was walking into a setup they couldn't get out of. No Caitlin Clark, no standard point guard in the rotation, and a road game against Angel Reese and a Chicago team that loves to pressure the ball. It's the kind of night where a few bad possessions can snowball out of control fast. Before tip-off, you could feel it in the building. Sky fans were ready to feast on mistakes, and the Fever's bench looked thin enough to make any coach nervous. The roster sheet made it clear. Someone was going to have to dribble the ball up the floor who normally never does. Chicago knew the Fever's handle wasn't at full strength, so they committed to swarming the moment the ball crossed half court. They sent traps along the sideline and forced the ball out of Kelsey Mitchell's hands early. The goal was simple: rack up turnovers, get easy runouts, and crush Indiana's rhythm before it even started. And honestly, for the first couple of trips, it looked like it might work. Passes were slow, spacing was cramped, and the Fever were burning through the shot clock just to get into a set. But here's where it got interesting. Maniuayus. The Fever never looked panicked.
Lexie Hull and performance is just as a coach, you see the work she puts in, how much belief, how fun was it to see her showing like that?
yeah, I'm proud of her. You know, she is her own worst critic. You know, I felt like we did a good job of still getting her the ball in positions that she had been getting the ball. We just try to do it, you know, a little bit more often and try to get it a little bit more in flow. And she let the game come to her. You know, her decision making has been really good.
yeah, I mean, I saw the time going down, so I was trying to pull out my inner Kelsey Mitchell.
For you, Lexie, what was kind of the last month like?
They weren't hitting shots in the first few minutes, but instead of rushing, they started stretching possessions, feeding the ball inside, and making Chicago guard in the half court. Coach Stephanie White made a big call: lean into bigger lineups and have multiple players share point duties. Sometimes it was Mitchell, sometimes it was Grace Berger, sometimes they had Alyssa Smith bring it up after a rebound. By spreading the responsibility, they made it harder for Chicago to figure out where the pressure should go. That wasn't just random experimenting either. White has talked all season about versatility and playing for each other, and this game was a perfect test of that. The message was clear: if you're on the floor, you're a decision maker. Kelsey Mitchell in particular embraced the shift. Instead of just looking for her own shot, she probed the defense, found cutters, and hit kickouts like she'd been running the offense all year. She ended the night with a season high in assists, and every dime was a sign that the Sky's defensive plan was starting to slip. Research backs up what we saw here. When teams don't rely on a single ball handler, especially in high-pressure situations, defenses have to constantly adjust. That leads to missed rotations, late switches, and openings you just don't get when you're predictable. By the middle of the second quarter, Chicago's pressure started resulting in fouls instead of steals, and Indiana began getting trips to the line or hitting open mid-range looks. Slowly, the tone flipped. Each empty Sky possession gave Indiana more confidence. The turnovers Chicago expected from the Fever weren't coming, but the Sky themselves started rushing passes and forcing bad shots. Indiana's defense tightened up, they crashed the boards, and quietly built a lead that didn't feel fluky. This wasn't one of those miracle shooting nights. It was a grind built possession by possession, and it came from players stepping into spots where they usually aren't asked to produce. Imagine you've missed almost everything you've put up for weeks. Every box score, every highlight reel, all showing the same thing. The shots just aren't falling. falling. You hear about it from the media, you feel it in practice, sometimes even your family asks what's going on. That was Lexie Hull's reality. Heading into this game, she was shooting 2 for 25 from beyond the arc over the previous couple of weeks. And here's the kicker. She hadn't hit a single 3 since August 1st.
She's a perfectionist. She wants everything to go right all the time, and it was nice to see the ball go through the net for her and for her to play with such confidence. For us,
I think it took everybody. Everyone played a piece, played a role, and I think that's how we got the dub.
And then Lexie, what was it like to finally break out of that slump, and especially on a night when
it's all there,
when they needed you to?
How do you stay out of your head or listen to the right people? What is that balance like? As you know what you need to do. Take us kind of what's that like?
Yeah, I think for me it's focusing on.
That's not just a slump, that's the kind of stretch that gets in your head. So when she touched the ball for her first open look in Chicago, you could almost feel the tension. She was set up on the wing, feet planted, no defender within a couple of steps. The entire sequence slowed for a split second. The Fever bench held their breath. Chicago's bench was already preparing for the rebound. Hull rose up for the shot, shoulders square, eyes locked on the rim. Even Caitlin Clark, sitting in her warm-ups, leaned forward, watching her every motion. The ball left her hands clean, rotating perfectly, and the sound when it smacked through the net was like flipping a switch. Clark jumped up instantly, clapping and shouting, and before Hull could even get back on defense, her teammates were tapping her on the back and yelling. The Fever bench stood. It wasn't just a make, it was the release of weeks of frustration. Suddenly it felt like all that weight she'd been carrying was gone. And once the lid came off, it stayed off. Hull followed that first one with another 3 a few minutes later, then another. At the end of the night, she was 4 for 6 from deep. Remember, she hadn't made 4 total threes in nearly a month. Those makes didn't just boost her numbers, they forced Chicago's entire defense to shift. The sky had been sagging off her, loading up on Mitchell and Smith. After she hit her third, they were sprinting out at her, getting caught in rotations, and leaving driving lanes wide open for her teammates. When a role player who's been cold suddenly gets hot, it's more than points on the board. The energy changes. You could see Mitchell feeding her every time she found daylight because confidence is contagious. The Fever started playing faster, smiling after made baskets, and their bench got louder on every possession. Meanwhile, Chicago's body language dipped, defensive chatter slowed, and you could see hesitation when they tried to decide whether to close out on Hull or help on a drive. There was one sequence in the second half where Hull's impact was crystal clear. She hit a 3 from the left corner, then on the next play, Chicago ran 2 defenders at her on the wing. That left the middle wide open for a cutter, and Indiana got an easy layup. On the very next possession, the defense stayed home on her, and Mitchell walked right into a pull-up jumper. 3 trips, 3 scores, all created because Hull had become a threat they couldn't ignore. By the final buzzer, her night was more than just a stat line. It was the image of a player shaking off doubt right in front of a crowd that had been waiting for a reason to get loud. Players hugged her, Clark smiled like she just hit the shots herself, and the Fever walked off knowing they just won without leaning on their usual face of the franchise. This wasn't just about pulling off a win without Caitlin Clark. This was Indiana showing they have an identity that doesn't revolve around one player. They didn't just survive, they controlled the game and walked out with a 22-point blowout against a team desperate for a win. If you still think this is only Clark's team, watch this game. You'll see ball movement, depth, and confidence from top to bottom. Follow them into the playoffs because this group is building something real. And if this is who they are under pressure, imagine what happens when they're at full strength.